unless the things that you enjoy begin to get in the way of your relationship with Christ. Unless your pursuits replace Him as God in your life. Those things that you run after become idols. Then we have a problem. Unless your wants and your needs and your desires prevent you from doing His will, from pursuing His plan for your life, from engaging with other people in the body of Christ, from carrying out the job that you have as a fisher of men. Remember what I told you? Jesus had just eaten with a whole bunch of people. He fed them miraculously, and what were the disciples complaining about? We don't have enough food. We don't have anything to eat. They became so focused on that single fact that they lost focus of the one that they were walking with, the one who could miraculously provide for them. If we become so focused on those little things in our lives, we lose focus on Him. And can I tell you something? I think sometimes it's easier to give up the tangibles. Sometimes it's easier to say, okay, Lord, I am not going to eat chocolate anymore. Chocolate's very good for you, so you might not want to say that one. Sometimes it's easier to say, Lord, I'm giving up golf. I'm giving up fishing for you, than it is to say, Lord, I'm giving you this situation, and I'm going to back up and let you have control. That's harder, isn't it? It's harder to say, Lord, I don't know what to do here, and so I'm going to let your plan move forward, not my own. Oh, just about every one of us by nature is a control freak. We love to have control, and that control is way more difficult to give to Him than something tangible. Are you using the tool of self-denial this morning? It's there's a very simple way to answer that question. Who has control in your life? That's it. Who has control in your life today? You or Him? Now, Jesus concludes His simple and yet seemingly impossible sentence with the third tool of the trade. He says, this person must take up his cross and follow me. Your cross. This is the single most difficult tool in the verse. It was the most tangible one for Christ because He literally was going to a real cross. But it kind of is the most intangible one for us, isn't it? How do we perceive that? Because most of us will probably never be executed. In fact, I dare say none of us will be executed on a cross in that fashion. So let's figure out together this morning what it means to actually take up our cross. Now, historically speaking, this would have or should have absolutely shocked the disciples who were present that day. The crowd that had been summoned. Remember, just prior to this, Jesus began to talk to them about the fact that He would suffer, He would be rejected, He would be killed, but He never mentioned a cross, did He? So now He says, as followers, you need to have this tool. You need to take up your cross and follow me. This is foreshadowing. This is showing the way that He would have to walk. And they understood what the cross was. They understood that it was an instrument of death. When people were condemned to die under the Romans, they were executed on a cross. And a part of that sentence was to carry the cross beam. The center stake would already be in the ground. They would carry the cross beam to their place of execution. And to carry it was burdensome. The beams actually weighed about 40 pounds. Most of the people had already been flogged. So you're carrying it on a wounded back. It was also incredibly disgraceful. The humiliation, the shame that went along with this was terrible. So carrying that beam to your place of execution would have wrecked you physically, but it also would have wrecked you emotionally. It was an extra bonus to the death sentence that you already had. You remember Jesus Himself had to carry His cross until He became so exhausted He couldn't under the pressure of it anymore. The cross meant death. But Jews weren't typically sentenced to capital punishment through death on a cross by Roman law. And neither are we. So what did it mean for the disciples to carry their cross? What does it mean to us? Well, it means that we have to walk in the same path that he walked. It means that every day you have to die to self, and you have to make a total dedication of your life to him, just as he dedicated his life to the Father. It means that you embrace the suffering, the disgrace, the persecution that might come along with being a follower of Christ. It means that you endure what is burdensome, what might be trying, that we do our duty as Christ followers to do what the Scriptures require of us. That we look at what his word says about what's required of us as followers of Jesus Christ, and we actually carry that out. And it means that you are willing to go to the death for him. And I don't just mean a physical death here, all kinds of death. Let me just point out something as kind of a side note this morning. Taking up your cross does not mean the little trials and burdens that you face in life. We've all heard that expression, oh, this troubled child of mine, this sickness, this job situation, it's just my cross to bear. Have y'all heard that? Some of us have probably said it. It's just my cross to bear. No, it's not. That is a trial that comes along with living in a fallen world. That is not your cross to bear. Your cross to bear is the same as my cross to bear. If you are a follower of Christ, then we are all bearing the same cross. And do you know what that is? It's the bold profession of Christ crucified. It's walking in his way and knowing him, and it's raising up that cross. Carrying your cross means you're lifting it up. You're raising it up to make him known to the world around you. It's embracing that symbol of suffering, which means that you are willing to suffer on behalf of someone else. That's what it means to carry your cross. To borrow a phrase from a devotional journal I'm going through, and I'm going to read you something out of it in just a second, taking up your cross means to live dead. And this is heavy, it is weighty, and it can lead our thoughts down a really terrible and morbid path. Because Christ's death on the cross was not pretty. It was gruesome, and it was terrible, and it was disgraceful, and it was morbid. And for some people in our world, taking up their cross literally means going to the death for him. If you wish to follow him, you have to be willing to take it that far. But I want to remind you this morning of the beauty that's inherent in this. The cross meant Jesus' death, but what did that mean for us? It means life, abundant life. In dying to yourself and taking up his cross, you will find a greater life than you could have ever imagined. Because in that you find your true self. In following his plan and his will for your life, making him Lord of your life, you find who he created you to be, who he designed you to be, the one that he made to live in a relationship with the God of the universe. If that does not make you excited this morning, nothing will. The one that he made to be conformed to his will, the one that he made in his image. When you take up your cross, that's what you find. And in the very next verse, if you kept reading, Jesus confirms that when he says, whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. Now, the cross also for Jesus meant passion. We call the series of events in Easter week the Passion. You remember the movie, The Passion of the Christ. What was his passion? It was doing the will of the Father. That's what his passion was. It was an utterly non-selfish desire to be obedient to God. So taking up your cross means becoming passionately obedient to the will of your Heavenly Father. And I want to tell you that living in the center of His will is the greatest place you could ever live. One author that I was reading said, it's exchanging dung for gold. I just want to read you this very short excerpt on being in the will of God. This is a missionary that wrote this. He says, I had utterly abandoned myself to Him. Could any choice be as wonderful as His will? Could any place be safer than the center of His will? Did not He assure me by His very presence that His thoughts toward us are good and not evil? Death to my own plans and desires was almost deliriously delightful. Everything was laid at His nail-scarred feet, life or death, health or illness, appreciation by others or misunderstanding, success or failure as measured by human standards. Only He Himself mattered. When you are in the center of His will, it is the greatest place you can be. And the final thing that the cross meant is love. The love that God the Father has for the world, the love of the Son in His willingness to go to that extreme for you and for me, for every single person who would ever live. So when you take up your cross, when you live to know Him and to make Him known, when you embrace the suffering that might go along with that, you begin to understand how Jesus could see it as the joy that was set before Him. And you begin to engage in the greatest love story ever told, and by its very nature, you will give that love to other people. In that love, you will live a life of unsurpassed greatness. You'll truly understand what Paul wrote when he said, everything else is loss compared to knowing Him. Everything else is lost. If we want to be followers of Christ, if we want to be fishers of men, then we've got to have those necessary tools. We have to have determination and self-denial, and we have to embrace the cross. And it will require you to live dead, but that living dead will be the most abundant life you will ever experience. I really struggled this week with how to end this message. Mike, you and the worship team come back up. Because the weight of this verse should remind us how serious this call is. It should remind us that when we are making that decision, when we're choosing to come after Him, it's not a decision to take lightly. It's not something that we can just kind of float through the day with and think, oh yeah, I did that once when I was 10 and now I'm done with it. It is a weighty decision and it's heavy. And that call should caution us to be properly equipped, to possess the right tools, and it speaks to us of the heaviness of what it means to embrace death and suffering. But should also show us that when we cheerfully determine to follow Him, when we deny our own selfish ambitions and we put those things aside, and we choose to get to that point where we can say all that matters is Him. He's all that matters. When we take up the passion and the love of the cross, then we'll find life, life, life. And I started preparing this message, and I had been researching it all week, and I was preparing it, and I was thinking, God, this is heavy. And by the time I got done, I wanted to jump. I literally was jumping up and down in my office. If you'd have driven by my windows that day, you would have thought I was crazy. Because there's life in this. There is life. Yes, it is a serious commitment. It is something we have to consider and rededicate ourselves to every single day. But there is life. And it is the greatest life you will ever know. And the truth is, some of us are walking around like we're dead. God does not want that for you. You're walking around saying, Lord, I've given up everything to follow you, and I'm just miserable. That wasn't the point of the cross. The point of the cross was for you to have life, and He wants you to live in that abundant life. That is the best witness that you can ever be out there. To be living in the abundance of the life that He's given you.